Hello everybody, my name is Jeff. I work for Jamf as a professional services engineer outside of our Amsterdam office all the way in the Netherlands. And for today's agenda, we have the following items to discuss. So first I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the backstory, how this session came about, and we're going to discuss two solutions in this session. First is the Azure way, the second is the independent platform way. Lastly, we're going to talk about the cost aspect and a bit of a comparison between the two solutions. The goal for this session will be that you will, by the end of it, learn how to implement either one of those solutions into your Jamf Pro instance. Let's get started. So a little bit of a backstory. We as a professional services team help customers move to the cloud on a regular basis. We do this very easy. If it's just a Jamf Pro instance, it doesn't take all that much. But most of the time, a Jamf Pro instance is integrated with different systems. We can think about the Apple systems. We can think about LDAP systems or even existing Microsoft certificate infrastructure. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about certificates, not exactly this one, but we're going to talk about different certificates that we're going to use with your Mac estate, and particularly about looking at moving to the cloud and especially moving to a cloud only solution. So that's a case where we don't have any on-premise or self-hosted infrastructure. That's a little bit about the backstory, how it came about. Quick disclaimer from my end. All of the research is performed independently. Jamf does not make any recommendation for any specific vendor during this session. On top of that, I also want to mention that during this session, we're going to talk a lot about different acronyms relating to certificate. If you are new to certificates, I would highly recommend watching sessions on YouTube from previous JNUCs, in particular the one from my colleague Laurent, who mentions the inner workings of a certificate, how we use certificates on a Mac. So this session will not go into that level of depth. We will go into the solutions on how to get that particular certificate to your Mac estate. Without further ado, this is the first solution that we're going to talk about. It is the Azure way. And the name of that solution is called Scapman, and his little brother RAS, or short for Radius as a Service. What is Scapman? That's an excellent question to ask. Is it a SCEP server with a cape? Not entirely, no. It is essentially a cloud-hosted certificate identity, not identity provider, cloud-hosted certificate authority. And it is cloud-hosted because it lives in your Azure tenant as a application. It's made in Germany and it runs pretty smooth. It integrates not only with Jamf, but also with other MDM, like Intune, for instance, or any other MDM where you could, for instance, manage your Android estate. If we look at the architecture, Jamf sits here on the right alongside of other MEMs, and we talk directly to Scapman. Now, before we get started with the technical bits and bobs, there are some prerequisites that we need before we can actually go ahead and get started on this. We need a Azure Global Admin that needs to perform its consent. We need an Azure subscription. That can be a pay-as-you-go subscription. That's fine, but you need at least some form of Azure subscription because in the end of the day, it does cost money to run this solution. We would need a Azure AD resource group. If you don't have one, it's not that big of a deal. We can generate one during the process. And lastly, we need a Jamf API user account with read permissions for computers, mobile devices, and users. Lastly, a fresh cup of coffee helps. It's not mandatory, but if you have one, it definitely helps with the process. Before we actually get started in the Azure, I recommend people going to the Azure Marketplace and search for Scapman or follow the link in the speaker handout. Once you do that, you land in the Azure page. You have to fill out some form there, and then you're able to select channel to follow. There are 3 channels: production, beta, and internal. Obviously, everybody tests out in production. However, if you do implement this into your production environment, I highly recommend going for the production channel. Anyway, whenever we get started here, there are quite a lot of fields that we need to fill in. We need to fill in the subscription. If you have multiple, you need to select the right one. We need to select a resource group. If you don't have one, you can create one. And then there's a lot of forms here that requires you to come up with some sort of naming. And there is 2 things I want to call out here because these are all highly customizable. The first one I want to call out is license. If you do not have a license, it's no problem. There's a community edition on their website. Scapman lists the different features between community and enterprise. And the other thing I want to call out is the application service name. We do need that a little bit later down in the process. That said, my recommendation is if you do this, and just go ahead and make a screenshot once you fill out all the fields. It helps with your own documentation, and it helps to find those stuff later down the line. Now, once you click on review and create, we are kind of expecting this to happen when everything passes. And even though everything passes, sometimes something doesn't go wrong. In this case, something went wrong. And yeah, it tells you exactly what goes wrong, how to fix it, and you can redeploy it from there. Just be aware, Azure is kind of sensitive when it comes to naming conventions and weird characters. It really doesn't like that. So my advice, keep things simple, but again, you can fill out a name to your own desire. All right, that's essentially the steps to do. This whole process takes about 5 to 10 minutes once the template runs and everything deploys as it should. Once everything's deployed, we can continue to step 2, and that is PowerShell. Now, I'm a Mac admin, so I'm not usually one to have PowerShell installed or have PowerShell ready at my Mac. So I was thinking, do I need to contact our IT department to get a Windows machine to get a PowerShell? And I was like, hang on a minute. Azure has something. Azure has a online shell available, an online PowerShell. You can navigate to shell.azure.com, sign in with your admin credentials or global admin credentials, as the case may be. Then it presents you here nicely with a web version of PowerShell, and that helps us greatly for performing the following tasks. That is, namely, to complete the setup of Scapman. And to complete that setup, there are 2 commands that we need to run. First command is that we need to install the module for Scapman. You can do that with the command on the screen. However, a note, they are in the session handout, so you will be able to copy them from there. They're also available in Scapman's documentation. So once we installed the Scapman module into this PowerShell shell, the next step is that we need to run the command complete Scapman installation. That will perform all the magic in the background and make sure that everything works as it should. Once we run that particular command, it is going to ask us for the Scapman application service name. And that is the app service name that we defined earlier in the process in the template name. Hence my suggestion to make a small screenshot so we know what we named it. This process takes again a couple of minutes, and once it's completed, it will give us the line Scapman and Cert Master configuration completed, and that's about all we have to do in PowerShell. So once we finish with PowerShell, we need to open up a Azure portal window, and we need to go to the application service or app services, and there we need to find the freshly installed Scapman service. On the right hand side, we will see a URL. Go ahead and click on that URL at this point in time. That should open up a new with the Scapman, and it's going to look something like this. Generally speaking, I don't really like red things because red things means it's broken, and that's exactly what's going on here. We're not entirely ready to get started with the product because there's still one more step that we need to complete. We need to create the root certificates, and that is relatively easily done by clicking on the blue link and confirming it. Takes about 3-4 minutes in my case before it's ready. That's really all there's to it. Once it's ready, it will look something like this. Again, almost everything is green. Note that the Intune button will be red, and that's because we don't use Intune as our endpoint management solution, but we use Jamf, so that's something that we can ignore. From this website, we can already grab the CA root certificate, and we need that for later deployment. So go ahead and click that at this point in time, and it will download the certificate to your computer. Also, something that we may need, that we will need later, is the CA thumbprint. So in Jamf we call it a fingerprint, and on Scapman it's called a thumbprint. I will refrain from having the discussion at this point in time, but yeah, go ahead and copy that somewhere in a text document. This is also the point where you can go ahead and open up a new tab and navigate to your Jamf Pro instance, because we are going to need to create a Jamf Pro API account that Scapman is going to use. You can name this whatever you want to name it. Just make sure to give it full access and custom privileges. It really only needs three privileges. It needs to be able to read for computers, it needs to be able to read for mobile devices, and it needs to be able to read for users. Those are really the only privileges it needs. You can enter your password to your liking there and save. Just note that Scapman does require basic authentication. Scapman is not yet, at this moment of speaking, ready for the bearer authentication token yet. So just bear that in mind. But I have been whispered that the developer is working on that as we speak. Anyway, that's the API account. So we're going to need to note that down somewhere in a safe place, because we need this in a few moments. The last thing we need to do on the Azure side, so we can navigate back to Azure, is go ahead and configure the application. So we do that by going to Application Services or App Services, find your Scapman instance and click on the Configuration tab. And then what you'll see there are various different variables that the application uses in order for it to work correctly. So these are almost like the plists that we deploy on the Mac side, but then this is again Azure, so works slightly different, but this is how it works. It's essentially a set of keys and values, and if you click on add, it's going to look something like this. In total, there's about 6 different keys to add. I'm just going to walk through them with you. So the first one that we're going to add is the app config Jamf validation enabled, and the value for that's going to be true. Just a side note, there's no need to stress about this. I will put these in the session handout guide. They're also noted in the Scapman documentation, along with other possible options that you may or may want to implement. But this is how you would do that. So the first one enables the Jamf integration. The second one is going to be a password that we would need to fill out. This is something that you can randomly generate, but it is a password that we would need to perform the certificate request. It's also known as a challenge in Jamf. So once you generate that password, just note it down, because we need it at a later point in time. Another key, this one is actually optional, but I did put it on the slide just for good measure. It's the validity. You can, if you want to, give it a validity. In this example, we set it to 365 days. And the next keys are pertaining to your Jamf instance. So you have the Jamf validation URL. That's going to be the URL of your instance name. So it's going to be something.jamfcloud.com, or if you already migrated to Jamf Cloud from a self-hosted environment, bravo. But this could be something else. And even if you were running at 8443, it's also time to put that 8443 at the end in this particular bit of configuration. Lastly, we need to enter the API username and API password that we generated in the previous step. So now we continue in the Jamf Pro instance. We're going to go to Settings, PKI Certificates, and then we are going to go to Management Certificate Template, and we're going to tick the box. Click on External CA, and we're going to tick the box. Enable Jamf Pro as a SCEP proxy for configuration profiles. So we're going to have to fill out this form relatively well. because it uses some information. And you can use the information from this slide. It will make your life easier. And again, the information will be in the session handout as well. There is a URL. So this is the same URL that we saw on the app services page in Azure. However, this is appended with /Jamf. Then we need to have the CA ident. That's going to be named, in my case, Scapman space, and then your instance of your application. That's what you filled out in the very first step in the form. Then we have a subject. You can specify anything you like. You can work with variables here. That's not a big issue. Just depends on whatever you like. In this case, I just note it down as O equals Jamf JNUC. Then we scroll down a bit. We have the challenge. So this is that password that we noted down in our configuration in the previous step. We need to put this here as a static challenge. The key size will be 2048. And then you need to tick those two boxes. And lastly, we have a fingerprint. So this is that CA thumbprint that we copied off the Scapman page before. Go ahead and save that, and then you can navigate to computers and configuration profiles to do a new one. First thing you got to do is upload that root CA that we downloaded before from the Scapman page. That will mark essentially our certificate as trusted because we do it in one chain. And don't forget to tick the box for allow all app access, followed by the SCEP payload. So both payloads will be in one configuration profile. At a later stage, when you would do something like network based authentication, you would also add the network payload to this exact same configuration profile. So we tick the box, use the external CA settings that we defined earlier, and the name will be device authentication. So that's a hard value, so we're gonna have to keep it that way. Redistribution settings, you could leave that to 14 days if you like. That will work quite well. Then the subject name, again, depending on it is what you do, you can use the example here on the slide, or you can work with your own sets of variables. It's not that big of a thing. It just really depends on your choice. And then if you scope it to the right computer group, you save it, we have profit. We have a certificate. So that, my friends, is the way how we would do it in the Azure way. So that one is all condensed into the Azure platform. The next solution that I want to talk about is an all-in-one independent solution. It's its own platform. It is called Secure W2. It's one platform. It contains PKI, so it handles the certificates for us. It also contains Radius, and it has the ability to do other stuff as well. It's just a very complete platform that works really well, and I'm going to show you how to implement that, integrate that into your Jamf Pro instance. So Secure W2, as I said before, it's a complete platform for certificate-driven security. That means we can use it for network, we can use it for VPN, SMIME, YubiKeys. There's a lot of use cases that we can use their platform for. It also integrates very nicely with identity providers like Azure, Okta, and Google to perform your Radius lookups if that's something that you would like to do. All right, the first step. So this is how the platform looks like when you log in. It's very white. It's very nice. First thing that we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to go into the PKI management, and we have to create our intermediate CA. That's the first step that we're gonna do. You do that by going here and add your certificate authority. Once you've done that, there's a couple of fields that we have to fill out. The first type is going to be intermediate. The common name, in my case, I call it JamfScap. You can call those elements what you would like to do. Leave the rest to the default and go ahead and save it. Then the next step is we need to create a signing certificate. And we saw the signing certificate in the previous solution as well. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but we need to have one, and we're going to use the Secure W2 platform to generate one. How do we do that? Well, we're going to select the operating system, Mac in this case. We're going to give it a description. In my case, I call it signing cert because, well, it's a signing cert. Then we need a MAC address. You can pick any MAC address in this particular use case. It just needs one. Then we need to click select the right CA, and that will be the intermediate CA that we generated in the previous step. We also need to define a common name, a validity, and then make sure at the bottom you select the distribution method download and you go ahead and save it. And it will present to you the certificate for you to download. Let's go ahead and store that because we need it a little bit later. All right, so once you've done the signing certificate, we need to do a certificate template. So Secure W2 uses that to build essentially its certificates. On the left hand side, we navigate to the certificate authorities, and at the bottom in this case, we've seen this window before. So at the bottom, we would navigate to add certificate template. If we look at what we are going to need to fill there, is we need to fill in some details. We need to have a name, in my case, Jamf certificate template. We need to have a subject that needs to represent what it is that I have here on the slide. Again, session handout is where you will be able to easily copy and paste that. Validity, as you like to choose. The key size will be 2048, SHA-256. The DNS, RFC, and other under the subject alternate name also need to match that format that we have here on the screen. And that is really it. Again, you will find them in the session handout as well. All right, so once we've done that, once we created the template, we need to create a API token, or rather, we need to create a secret that we're going to use later, and we need to build our SCEP URL. That's something that we need to do based on the information that we already have. But first things first, you go to the API tokens section on the left one. You add a user. This is what it looks like. We're going to give this one a name. In my case, I call it Jamf API. The type will be SCEP enrollment token. And the vendor, of course, is going to be Jamf. Once you save it, it's going to present you with a CSV. Go ahead and download that because we need the information out of that CSV and put that information that's inside of that CSV in a text editor because we need to use that information. And I'll tell you how to use that in just a second. Another part, in order for us to build our SCEP URL, is going to be we need to create the CRL from the certificate authority. So on the left hand side, you navigate to certificate authorities, and then you select the one R intermediate that we created in the first step. And then we are going to copy, in this case, the CRL base. You can copy the delta as well is that something that you would like to do. Anyway, we need one of the two. And I'll show you what we're going to do. So we're going to go into the text editor that we just opened up. And first of all, we find our CRL there, and we find the API secret, followed by, well, I copied it here twice just to demonstrate what it is that we need to do. But both information, so the CRL from your certificate intermediate, as well as the API secret needs to be in the same editor. So what we need to do is we need to look at the URL from the CRL, and we need to copy the part that is behind the slash in the first section of the URL. It's a bit of a weird identifier. So what we need to do is we need to look at the URL from the API secret and just essentially overwrite that with the information out of the certificate intermediate URL. It's demonstrated here on the screen. That gives us with a nice URL as well as the secret. So we need that in a little bit of time. So don't throw that one away just yet. Hold the horse because we need that in the Jamf configuration. All right, and then we are going to go and use that. But before we're going to use that, we need to create a user role policy. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to navigate to roles on the left-hand side, and then we find it under policy management. We're just going to do a new one. We give it a name, and we're going to continue to the conditions. You'll find that after you save it. Yeah, in the conditions, you need to select the Jamf API token that we created just 2 steps ago, and then you save. That's it. We're almost there, boys. Then the last thing is going to be create the enrollment policy. Again, navigate to enrollment in the menu bar, create the policy, give it a name. In the conditions, select that user role that we just created in the previous steps. And in the settings, you just need to make sure you have the right intermediate. That's the intermediate from step 1. We're almost there. So this was essentially the hard part. That's just setting up the secure W2 platform in order for it to process the Jamf request and that it knows how to do it. So now we are going to continue by configuring Jamf. So head over to your Jamf Pro instance and let's continue. Have a look at that. So they work, both solutions work with the SCEP proxy payload. So we're going to go back to the SCEP proxy from a page. If you haven't done so already, you can go ahead and go to the external CA section, tick the box, and paste in that URL. That's that very long URL that we built just 2 steps ago. You need to paste that in. Also, once you pasted that in, go ahead from your text editor to copy the secret. That's the bit before the comma, not including, but before the comma. And yeah, we need that in just a second. So the URL is pasted. The static needs to go into, the challenge needs to go into static, and that's where we paste in that that secret thing from the text editor. The key size is set to 2048. It's best practice not to have anything lower. Make sure the 2 boxes are ticked and saved, and go ahead and save. And now at this point in time, remember in step 2, we generated a signing certificate. So this is the point where we're going to have to upload that signing certificate. Once you uploaded the signing certificate, it is done in this particular section. Because now we go back to the computer configuration profiles. In the profile, you need to enter the CA ident. That is the common name for the intermediate certificate that we generated before. We need to enter a subject name. For subject name, you can again use gem variables if you would like, but you can also use hard-coded values. It just depends on what you want to do. In this example, I just used the serial number of my test device as an example. Then at the bottom, we have the subject alternate names, and in this case, I chose to use an RFC822 name. You can use the format that is on the screen as an example. And once you scope it, hooray, we have a certificate. So that is essentially the process of integrating both products with Jamf Pro. Both take a little bit of work, but again, if you follow the steps and the documentation of both vendors, and I must say both vendors have done an excellent job with their documentation, you will get a long way. And that will lead you to your profit. Now, what are the next steps? Well, we got a certificate, but you got to do something with it. There's loads of things to how you can use your certificate. You can use it in for your network authentication. But if you want to do network authentication, you also need a radius solution. So if we think about a radius solution, well, how would we do that with Scapman? Well, Scapman, as I mentioned in the first slides, he has a little brother. It's called RAS, Radius as a Service. It's developed by the same company, also Azure-based, so it works. It does require a little bit of configuration, but for the sake of timing on this presentation, I omitted that. But again, the documentation is really good on that, on how to set that up. But just know that it is a separate product. Secure W2 has the radius functionality built in. And again, that also that requires you to at least do a little bit of configuration on the secure W2 part, make sure that it works. But you can also do stuff like forward lookup usernames in, for instance, an Okta LDAP or a Azure AD, if that's something that you would like to do. All right, and now we are going to go into the comparison. So let's compare the two. If we look at Scapman plus RAS, the platform is in that case an Azure platform. It's all hosted within the realm of Azure. But for Secure W2, it is not. It's an independent platform. The integration via Jamf all goes via the SCEP proxy settings. The platform are both multi-platform. So in both cases, if you use a different MDM, let's say for Windows or Android, you can also integrate that into the same solution if you want to, again, do 802.1x for your network authentication. So the radius integration, well, with Scapman, that's a separate product, completely separate license and separate product, but it is done by the same vendor. With Secure W2, it's not. It's built into the platform, so it's essentially a one-stop shop. It's again really cool and really nifty. The ease of setup, as we just demonstrated, both are very well documented. They're very easily to implement in Jamf Pro. However, Scapman has the upper hand here because it's just slightly easier to implement that solution into Jamf, in my opinion. Lastly, the pricing bit, I omitted the pricing because it's very difficult to get a one-on-one comparison, I found. Especially because Scapman runs on Azure. Azure has its own set of running costs associated with that. So just bear that in mind. With Secure W2, you just have their license cost and then you're done. Anyway, in both cases, if you're interested in test driving one of the solutions, get in touch with the vendors. They'll be happy to help you. So the conclusion is, moving to cloud, what about the certs? Yes, we can, and yes, we have demonstrated this. Thank you so much for listening.